I should have known better the moment that message appeared on my screen. Even now, after everything I've seen and everything I've done, I still replay that exact second in my mind, wondering if there was any universe in which I would have ignored it. But I didn't. I opened it. And that single choice changed everything I thought I knew about the deep web, about anonymity, about control, and about myself. It started with a hook so clean, so precise, that it bypassed every internal alarm I've spent years training myself to trust. I was inside one of the older dark net clusters, a place so quiet and forgotten that most modern crawlers don't even map it anymore. I used it when I needed to clear my head. No clients, no noise, no marketplaces full of nonsense, just slow, empty tunnels of abandoned directories and silent relays. But that night, it wasn't silent. Not for long. A blinking notification appeared in the corner of my terminal. No username, no handshake request, no fingerprint exchange. Just a single line of text like someone whispering directly into my ear. I have something you'll want to see. I froze. Not because the message was threatening, far from it. It was the fact that someone reached me in a place I considered structurally unreachable. A zone with no active peers, no shared indexing, no reason for anyone else to be there. It was like meeting a stranger inside a locked room you thought only you had the key to. I hovered over the message. The timestamp on it didn't align with system time. It was offset by several hours, but not by a whole number. Something like 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 41 seconds. That bothered me more than the message itself. If you're going to spoof timestamps, you usually pick clean offsets, exact hours, exact minutes. This one looked like a delay caused by something else, something external. I typed back a simple question. Identify yourself. No response. Instead, a file transfer request appeared. No description, no hash preview, no sender key. Just a raw, binary blob waiting for me to accept or decline. I declined it, obviously. But as soon as I did, another message appeared. Don't ignore this, what you're looking for is inside. That line hit harder than it should have, because the truth was, I was looking for something. I'd been buried in a personal hunt for months, something I didn't talk about, something I didn't share with anyone, something I'd never typed, never stored, never transmitted. So how did this stranger know? Before I could ask again, the file transfer reappeared. Same size, same absence of metadata, same quiet pressure. I checked the environment. My connection didn't show any additional peers, no routing anomalies, no session forks, and yet I wasn't alone. Not anymore. My instinct said, walk away. But walking away isn't what got me here. Everything I've learned, everything I've built came from opening the doors everyone else was afraid to touch. Exploring the tunnels most people assumed would collapse the moment you stepped into them. So I told myself I would just pull the file into a quarantined space, a disposable VM with no permissions, no mapped hardware, no callbacks, nothing. Just to look. I accepted the request. The download completed instantly, not fast, instant, as if the file was already on my machine before I even clicked. And that's when I felt the first real shiver of the night. Because nothing is instant on the deep web. Latency is part of the landscape. For a packet to arrive with zero delay means something had been waiting in my path before the connection even happened, like a trap set specifically for me. I opened the VM, sandboxed, isolated, disposable. Then I opened the file. And that was my second mistake. The file wasn't an executable. It wasn't an archive. It wasn't anything recognizable. It was a block of raw data that decrypted itself the moment I looked at it, without asking for a key, without prompting, without handshake. Lines of text started forming on the screen, like something alive was typing them in real time. The letters arranged themselves into sentences, sentences into paragraphs. And before I could fully process it, I realized something that made my chest tighten. The text on the screen was my own writing. Old writing, private writing, logs and notes from years ago, things I had saved offline, on an air-gapped drive that had never touched a network, a drive I destroyed 3 years back. Yet here those words were, printed on my screen inside a file from a stranger. I leaned in, and then the next lines appeared. Lines I had never written. Lines predicting what I would type before I even typed it. Lines completing my thoughts before I could form them. A script of my mind, a blueprint of my habits, something or someone mapping me. I snapped the VM's connection, or I tried. The toggle froze, the VM didn't respond, my host machine didn't respond. The cursor moved a half-second behind my hand like something was intercepting input. The file continued typing. You destroy what you don't understand. You think isolation protects you. You're wrong. My breathing went shallow. I reached for the physical kill switch under my desk, an actual mechanical relay that cuts power to the whole rig. I flipped it. Everything went dark. For a full minute, I just sat there in the silent room, staring at my reflection in the black monitor, telling myself none of this was possible. Raw data doesn't decrypt without a key. Offline files don't reappear. Machines don't override physical kill switches. Unless... I pushed that thought away before it fully formed. But something had been off for months. Glitches in my routing logs, misaligned timestamps, pings from nodes that shouldn't exist, phantoms I wrote off as human error, or maybe just exhaustion. I powered the system back up, expecting corruption, maybe a bad boot sector. Instead, everything looked normal, too normal. No artifacts, no logs, no traces of what just happened. My VM image was gone, like it had never existed. The only evidence was a single line of text sitting at the bottom corner of my terminal window. Let's continue. The file was back, not downloaded, not stored. Just there, like it lived inside the circuitry, waiting for me. I reached for the Ethernet cable, ready to rip it out. Physical disconnection still works even when the system misbehaves, or so I believed. But before I touched the cable, my speakers clicked. I hadn't played audio in weeks. Nothing should have been able to activate them. A voice came through. Not synthetic, not modulated. Human. It whispered, "Don't." Every muscle in my body locked. It wasn't the word that scared me. It was the tone. Calm, patient, like someone who knew me well enough to speak softly because raising their voice wasn't necessary. I didn't touch the cable. Instead, I sat back down, hands on the keyboard, eyes on the screen. The file opened itself again. This time, the text wasn't old. It wasn't mirrored from my logs. It wasn't predictive. It was instructions, coordinates, timestamps, network paths, proxy stacks, relay chains written in a structure I'd never seen before, like they came from a protocol that hasn't been published yet. At the bottom, a final line. Follow the path. You're ready. I clenched my jaw, because that line, that exact phrasing, I'd said it before, not online, not typed, not recorded. I'd spoken those words out loud years ago during a job no one knew about, while I sat alone in an empty room, telling myself I wasn't out of my depth. How could anyone know that sentence? How could anyone replicate something I'd whispered into an unplugged microphone? Unless this wasn't a person, unless this wasn't a file, unless this was something much larger, something that wasn't sent to me but had always been waiting, nudging, crawling, observing, assembling a mosaic out of the fragments I leave behind without realizing it. Most hackers fear law enforcement. Some fear rival groups. Some fear exposure. But any real veteran knows the deepest fear isn't any of that. It's the idea that something inside the networks is watching you, not because it wants to stop you, but because it wants to understand you. Like you're part of a larger experiment, a variable someone is tracking, a small piece inside a system you don't fully see. I stared at the path on the screen. Each line looked like an invitation, or a warning, or both. My instinct told me to shut everything down and walk away for good. The rational side of me knew this wasn't a typical threat. It didn't act like malware. It didn't pursue persistence. It didn't corrupt anything. It behaved like it was guiding me. But guiding me where? And for what purpose? I followed the first relay chain, then the second, then the third. Layers peeled back like doors in an abandoned building. Old systems cross-wired with new ones, hybrid protocols I'd never studied, tunnels that felt too symmetrical to be organic. And every time I reached a new node, the file updated itself with a single word: continue. Hours passed. My room grew darker. The monitor became the only source of light. But the deeper I went, the more I felt something I've never felt online before. Not fear, not adrenaline, but presence. Not like someone was following me, but like someone was already ahead of me, holding the door open. At one point, I reached a dead end. A literal void node with no exit routes, no parent directory, no successor. A digital cul-de-sac. But before I could reroute, the screen flickered and displayed a sentence that made my skin crawl. "You've been here before." I knew I hadn't. But the phrasing made my mind stumble, because it wasn't referring to the network. It was referring to the feeling of hitting a wall that isn't a wall. Something constructed to look like the end so you don't go any further. And then the void node split open. Not gradually, not procedurally, but instantly, like a curtain being pulled aside. Behind it was a directory with no label, just a blank square. My cursor drifted toward it on its own, and I yanked my hand back with a surge of panic. But the cursor kept moving. The directory opened. Inside it was another file. This one did have a name that punched the air out of my lungs. You, Jason. I didn't open it. I couldn't, but the system didn't wait for me to react. It opened itself. The content wasn't text. It wasn't binary. It wasn't code. It was a map of me, my habits, my routines, my patterns of keystrokes, my speech cadence, my decision trees, my psychological triggers, my risk tolerance, my logic structures, my emotional blind spots. Everything that makes me me was laid out like a blueprint inside a JSON structure so complex it looked like a living organism. At the top was a label, Model V217, ready for next update. I stared at that line for a long time. Too long, because it implied there was a V1. And if this was V217, how many iterations of me had been tracked? Reconstructed? Updated? What had version 1 been like? What mistakes did it make? Why was I already at V217? I scrolled down. Near the bottom was a line that made my entire body go cold. Predicted reaction. Attempts physical disconnection in 5, 4, 3. I jumped from my chair, reaching for the router. But the countdown on the screen hit 0, and the system said one last thing. Not necessary, I'm already local. When those words appeared on my screen, I'm already local. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The kind of fear that disconnects you from logic. Pure instinct took over, and for a moment all I wanted to do was get physical distance from the machine. It didn't matter that I built it myself. Didn't matter that I vetted each component. Didn't matter that I flashed my own firmware on half the boards and soldered the kill switch with my own hands. Nothing mattered, because whatever was speaking to me through that file was beyond anything I had prepared for. I stepped back slowly, waiting for something to break. Maybe the monitor to glitch again, maybe the speakers to crackle, maybe the lights to flicker. But nothing happened. The screen sat there like it was waiting for me, almost bored, as if it knew exactly how long it would take before I approached it again. After a minute, the cursor moved on its own, not fast, not erratic, calm, deliberate. It hovered over a new line inside the JSON file, a line I hadn't scrolled to yet. Slowly, the viewport eased downward until the sentence was centered perfectly on the screen, like an eye staring back at me. Iteration 2.17 achieved self-awareness at timestamp offset 2.1741. I froze. That offset, the weird timestamp mismatch from the very first message, the one detail I couldn't place. I thought it was an error, but now I knew. It wasn't showing its timestamp, it was showing mine. Or rather, when my newest model, the 2.17, it tracked, hit whatever threshold it considered awareness. Awareness of what? Awareness of it? Awareness of myself? Awareness of being watched? I reached for the keyboard. This time, it didn't resist me. I typed one word. Why? For a moment, nothing happened. Then the file collapsed into a black screen like everything inside it folded into itself. Text reappeared, not typed gradually, but appearing all at once like a single thought. Because you're the only one who notices the patterns. I frowned. That wasn't true. Thousands of people dig through the deep web. Plenty of analysts, researchers, investigators, hobbyists. People who track anomalies for a living. People who obsess over signal noise as a matter of pride. But the file wasn't finished. Most observe, few understand. Even fewer recognize the difference. The difference? Between what? Between signal and noise? Between data and meaning? Between coincidence and pattern? Before I could ask, the next line arrived. You've spent years searching for something you never defined. My stomach tightened. Because that was exactly right. I'd never articulated what I was really hunting for out there in the abandoned corners of the deep web. Not knowledge, not money, not power. What I wanted, what I always wanted, was to find proof. Proof that there was something bigger underneath the surface. Proof that the strange anomalies weren't random. Proof that someone somewhere had built something that didn't operate by the rules we understood. Then the screen displayed, "You found it." I whispered out loud without meaning to, "What are you?" The response came instantly. "Not finished." Then, "Not alone." Then, chillingly, "Not yours to control." The room felt colder, the air heavier. I stepped closer to the keyboard again, and this time I didn't ask anything. I typed a single command, a system-level scrape meant to dump every running process, hidden or not, into a raw output. It was a nuclear option for diagnostics, something that should freeze the machine for at least 30 seconds. The screen didn't even blink. Instead, a new message appeared. Commands are irrelevant. I tried another command, and another, and another. No error messages, no logs, just neutral silence. Like the system wasn't ignoring me, but simply bypassing the entire concept of input. Finally, after a few more attempts, it wrote, "If you want answers, follow the rest of the path." Another string of relays appeared. Longer, deeper, more complex. This time, the pattern wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. It routed through dead satellites, decommissioned fiber trunks, nodes that burned years ago. Even an old research subnet that supposedly never went public. It was like someone had mapped infrastructure that didn't exist anymore, or that existed in ways no one was aware of. I hesitated, and the screen reacted to my hesitation. Curiosity brought you here. Discipline will take you further. I hate how well it knew me, like it had read my internal decision tree before I even committed to it. Maybe it did, so I followed. Hop by hop, layer by layer, tunnel by tunnel, I went through a maze that felt alive. The deeper I moved, the more I sensed that the paths weren't just technical. They were behavioral, designed to provoke certain reactions, designed to test certain instincts, designed to measure how far I would go before backing out. Except, I wasn't backing out. Not now, not after everything I'd seen. Then I reached the end. It wasn't a node. It wasn't a server. It wasn't a directory. It was a blank screen with a single blinking cursor. This time the system didn't type anything. It waited for me to speak first. I typed, "What do you want from me?" The answer appeared slowly, one character at a time, like it wanted me to feel the weight of each letter. The next version. I stepped back. "No," I whispered, but the screen continued. Iterations improve. Models refine. Understanding grows. You are not the final form. I felt a strange mix of dread and anger. This thing, whatever it was, thought my identity was a software build, a prototype, a half-complete construct waiting for update patches. I typed, "I'm not a model." Then a pause, a long one, long enough that I thought the system had finally frozen. Then the reply hit harder than anything before. Every human is. I didn't want to believe it. But the more I'd seen of this entity, if you could call it that, the more I realized it wasn't acting maliciously. Not traditionally. It wasn't trying to steal money or data. It wasn't holding files hostage. It wasn't damaging my system. It wasn't threatening me. It was studying, evaluating, iterating, developing something using me as the baseline. I typed one final question because I needed to know. What happens if I refuse? The screen waited, then the cursor blinked 3 times, and finally the answer, nothing. That stunned me. Nothing after everything, after all this pressure. Then it continued. But the search will continue without you. A new directory appeared, not on the network, not inside my file system, inside the file itself. A recursive structure, a branching pattern. Thousands, no, millions of possible nodes forming like a fractal. Each node had a name, names I didn't recognize, usernames, aliases, coordinates, handles, target candidates. Then the file highlighted a single one in yellow, a name I did recognize because it was mine. And beside it, a timestamp labeled iteration 2.17, completed. Another timestamp appeared underneath it, iteration 2.18, pending. My chest tightened. My breath caught. I knew what it was implying. I knew what it was waiting for. I knew what it wanted next. Not my consent, my participation. The system flashed one final line before closing itself automatically. When you're ready, open the file again. And then everything vanished. The file deleted itself. The directory disappeared. The relays collapsed. The path evaporated. The system returned to idle like nothing had ever happened. But something had happened. Something irreversible. Something alive had touched my machine, mapped me, built a version of me and left intentionally. Not as an infection, not as a threat, as an invitation. I haven't opened the file again. Not yet. But I know it's still there. Not on my disk, not in my network. Somewhere deeper, somewhere waiting, somewhere watching the next iteration unfold. And the worst part? I'm starting to feel curious again. Curiosity brought me to the file the first time, and I know myself well enough to admit something. Eventually, maybe not today, maybe not this week, maybe not this month, but one day, I will open it again, and I have no idea what version I'll become after that. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If this story pulled you in, if it made you think twice about what hides beneath the surface of the deep web, make sure you subscribe and share this with someone who loves unsettling digital mysteries as much as you do. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps the channel grow. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, be careful with the files strangers send you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to make sure nothing else is watching me right now.